was our only chance.
Next, is this the end for the Satori crew?
I didn't want to get off. I didn't want to leave her.
And still ahead, October 1991. It is day 5 of the Satori's ill-fated voyage. The small boat is tossing helplessly in the savage seas of the perfect storm. Below deck, the 2 terrified women on the crew have reached their breaking point. They're convinced that Ray Leonard's refusal to try to make it to land has doomed them to die. Now, they plan a mutiny of sorts. While Ray is topside securing everything on deck, the crew is on the radio, secretly making a frantic call for help.
42, 72, 75, 36.
Their distress call reaches the United States Coast Guard, and a rescue helicopter is sent in search of the Satori. It locates the sailboat 50 miles off the Massachusetts coast and makes radio contact.
Right 5, make swimmer down. Right 10.
They tell the crew to put on their cold water exposure suits so they can be hoisted off the boat. But they don't have any suits. The Coast Guard decides a helicopter rescue is too dangerous. If anyone on the Satori fell into the cold water, they could die of hypothermia. But if the crew stays on board and the Satori breaks up in the heavy waves, they would meet the same fate. Commander Larry Brudnicki knows he must get exposure suits to the Satori as fast as possible. As his 205-foot cutter Tamaroa heads for the sailboat, he's astonished by the sheer magnitude of the storm.
When you're on the bridge of your ship, you're looking down at the tops of the waves. Now, our bridge was 40 feet above the water, and we were literally looking up to the tops of the waves. I had a ship, I had 2 small boats, and I had a helicopter. And it's my job to determine the least risk method of rescuing the people. The 2 women were concerned for their own safety, and there's a good reason for them to be concerned for their safety. They weren't sure that they were going to live through this storm if they stayed on the boat.
Commander Brudnicki decides the best rescue plan is to send a small Coast Guard inflatable over to the Satori, put the crew into exposure suits, and bring them back to the Tamaroa. But while explaining the plan to Ray Leonard over the radio, the commander is shocked to learn that the Satori's captain doesn't want to be rescued.
I didn't want to get off. I didn't want to leave her. But I'd had this boat for 20 years. She was a wonderful boat, a good friend. And I was not in any position to leave such an important friend.
Commander Brudnicki understands Ray's hesitation, but experience tells him this is a storm like no other, and it's only getting worse. So he makes a tough decision and has the Coast Guard declare the Satori a manifestly unsafe voyage. This means Ray must abandon ship. If he disobeys the Coast Guard order, he could lose his captain's license.
So I finally agreed that I would get off with the crew.
With the rescue plan in place, the Coast Guard inflatable heads for the Satori. The height of the waves obscures the tiny boat. They get the exposure suits onto the Satori. But before they can evacuate the crew, a giant wave smashes the 2 boats together. Now the Coast Guard crew members can barely keep their inflatable afloat. Commander Brudnicki must act fast. He orders the helicopter to drop rescue swimmer David Moore into the tempest below.
It's hard to get a good perspective on the waves when you look down on them and you're not in the water. So they look much smaller than when you're actually down in the water.
But once Moore's in the water, the waves push him away from the sailboat. Commander Brudnicki has no choice. He radios over to the Satori for everyone to jump into the water. This way, rescue swimmer Moore can reach them.
Normally, you don't want to put people in the water. That's usually what you're trying to avoid. But when you cannot safely get them off the boat any other method, then that's something you're going to have to do.
Moore swims over to Ray and the crew as the helicopter hovers overhead. The chopper lowers the rescue basket, but can carry only one person at a time.
But back off a little bit. You're clear, Glenn. Okay, guys. The raft's getting swamped. Okay, he's calling me to him. Forward right. How about move off to the left again? Forward right. How about calling me? Okay. Basket clear the water, clear for back and left 25. Much for speed, I'm going to just stay about right in here. Okay, she's commenced.
One by one, Moore gets each of the Satori crew into the basket and onto the helicopter.
And basket's inside the aircraft.
Like any good captain, Ray waits for his crew members to be rescued first.
Hoist is complete.
After Ray is in the chopper, Moore is pulled up. But the rescue isn't over yet. The Coast Guard rescue team from the damaged inflatable now needs to be plucked from the raging sea.
They had all their survival gear on. Then it was just one at a time to the basket with them. I was the last one up.
During the 3 days that the storm raged, the Coast Guard assisted in the rescue of 18 people. But not everyone was as lucky as Ray Leonard and his crew. The storm claimed 8 lives up and down the East Coast. Could Ray and his crew have survived the perfect storm if they had stayed on the boat? Many questions still remain.
The Satori eventually did wash up on the beach. Now, does that mean that the people on the sailboat still would have been on the boat and they still would have been alive? Not necessarily.
The story of the Satori has important lessons for anyone who dares to venture offshore. The Coast Guard recommends that you check weather reports regularly and quickly head for a safe haven when a storm is approaching. If you're caught in bad weather, secure the boat by tying everything down and keep the cabin watertight. Wear life jackets and have other protective clothing such as exposure suits. But ultimately, your biggest asset when things go wrong is your skill and that of your crew. Because you never know when you might have to survive the perfect storm.